In the ancient land of Canaan, there lived a young man named Joseph who wore a coat of many colors, a gift from his father that sparked jealousy in the hearts of his 10 older brothers. Joseph had dreams, vivid, powerful dreams that he couldn't help but share. One night, he dreamed that he and his brothers were binding sheaves of grain in the field, when suddenly his sheaf stood upright, while theirs gathered around and bowed down to it. Another time, he dreamed the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing to him. His brothers' resentment grew darker with each passing day. Even their father Jacob rebuked him, asking if he truly believed his own parents and brothers would bow before him. But Jacob kept the matter in mind, wondering what these dreams could mean. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were tending flocks in distant fields. When they saw him approaching in his colorful coat, their hatred boiled over. "Here comes the dreamer," they sneered. "Let's kill him and throw him into a pit. We'll say a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben, the eldest, couldn't bear the thought of killing his own brother. "Let's not take his life," he urged. "Just throw him into this empty cistern in the wilderness." Secretly, he planned to rescue Joseph later. When Joseph reached his brothers, they stripped off his treasured coat and threw him into the dry cistern. As they sat down to eat, seemingly unbothered by his cries for help, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared on the horizon, their camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh bound for Egypt. Judah spoke up. "What profit is there in killing our brother? Let's sell him to these traders instead." And so they pulled Joseph from the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. The traders continued their journey with Joseph as their captive, while his brothers slaughtered a goat, dipped Joseph's coat in its blood, and brought it to their father. Jacob's anguish was unbearable. He tore his clothes and mourned for his son, refusing all comfort. "I will go down to the grave mourning for my son," he wept. Meanwhile, Joseph found himself sold again in Egypt, this time to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Despite his circumstances, Joseph prospered. His integrity and wisdom became evident to all who knew him. Potiphar noticed that everything Joseph touched succeeded, and soon he put Joseph in charge of his entire household. For a time it seemed Joseph's fortunes had turned, but another test awaited him. Potiphar's wife took notice of the young Hebrew. Day after day she tried to seduce him, but Joseph refused. "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" he would say, fleeing from her advances. One day, when no one else was in the house, she grabbed his cloak and demanded he lie with her. Joseph fled so quickly he left his garment in her hands. Enraged by the rejection, she falsely accused him of assault. When Potiphar heard his wife's accusations, he had Joseph thrown into the king's prison. Even in prison, Joseph's character shone through. The warden put him in charge of all the prisoners, recognizing his trustworthiness. It was there that Joseph's gift for interpreting dreams would change his life forever. Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker had both offended the king and were in prison. One night, each had a troubling dream. When Joseph saw their distressed faces the next morning, he asked what troubled them. They explained their dreams, lamenting that no one could interpret them. "Don't interpretations belong to God?" Joseph said. "Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer went first. "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in his hand." Joseph smiled. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position, and you'll place his cup in his hand just as before." Then he added hopefully, "When all goes well with you, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly taken from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I've done nothing to deserve being in this dungeon." Encouraged by this favorable interpretation, the baker shared his dream. "I had 3 baskets of bread on my head. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but birds were eating them." Joseph's face grew serious. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will execute you and impale your body on a pole. The birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, everything happened exactly as Joseph had predicted. The cupbearer was restored to his position, while the baker met his tragic end. But the cupbearer, caught up in his restored life, forgot all about Joseph. 2 more years passed with Joseph in prison. Then one night, Pharaoh himself had troubling dreams. He stood by the Nile River and saw 7 healthy, fat cows come up from the water to graze. Then 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up and devoured the healthy cows. Pharaoh woke, disturbed, then fell asleep and dreamed again. This time, 7 heads of grain, plump and good, grew on a single stalk. Then 7 thin heads, scorched by the east wind, sprouted and swallowed up the healthy grain. In the morning, Pharaoh summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could interpret his dreams. Finally, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. "Today I remember my shortcoming," he confessed, and told Pharaoh about the Hebrew slave who had accurately interpreted dreams in prison. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. After quickly shaving and changing clothes, Joseph stood before the most powerful man in Egypt. "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it," Pharaoh said, "but I've heard that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it," Joseph replied humbly, "but God will give Pharaoh the answer he seeks." After hearing both dreams, Joseph said, "God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows and 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. The 7 lean cows and 7 worthless heads of grain are 7 years of famine. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout Egypt, but they'll be followed by 7 years of famine so severe that the abundance will be forgotten. The reason the dream came to Pharaoh twice is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and he will do it soon." Then Joseph offered counsel. "Let Pharaoh appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee Egypt. Set commissioners to take 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of abundance. Store up grain as a reserve for the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so the country won't be ruined." Pharaoh was deeply impressed. "Can we find anyone like this man, in whom is the Spirit of God?" he asked his officials. Then turning to Joseph, he declared, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so wise and discerning as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only I, sitting on the throne, will be greater than you." At age 30, Joseph went from prisoner to second in command of all Egypt. Pharaoh gave him his signet ring, dressed him in fine linen robes, and placed a gold chain around his neck. He gave him a chariot to ride in, and people would shout before him, "Make way!" Pharaoh also gave Joseph an Egyptian name and a wife, Asenath. During the 7 years of abundance, Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, storing grain in vast quantities, like the sand of the sea, so much that he stopped measuring it. He built massive storehouses in every city, filling them with grain from the surrounding fields. Joseph also became a father during these years, and his 2 sons brought him joy even as he prepared for the coming crisis. Then, just as predicted, the 7 years of famine began. The drought spread across all the surrounding lands, but throughout Egypt there was food. When the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, he told them, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians and to people from other nations who came to Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe everywhere. Back in Canaan, Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt. "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" he asked his sons. "Go down there and buy some for us so we won't die." 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to Egypt, but Jacob kept Benjamin, Joseph's only full brother, at home, fearing harm might come to him. When the brothers arrived, they bowed down before the governor of Egypt with their faces to the ground, not recognizing him as their own brother. But Joseph recognized them immediately, and his dreams from youth flashed through his mind. He spoke harshly to them through an interpreter. "Where do you come from?" "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Joseph accused them of being spies, which they desperately denied. "We were 12 brothers," they explained, "sons of one man. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." Joseph's heart ached hearing them speak of Benjamin and himself, but he maintained his stern demeanor. He imprisoned them for 3 days, then proposed a test. One brother would remain imprisoned while the others returned home with grain. They must bring back their youngest brother to prove their honesty. The brothers, not knowing Joseph could understand Hebrew, spoke among themselves. "Surely we're being punished because of our brother. We saw his distress when he pleaded with us. But we wouldn't listen. That's why this distress has come upon us." Reuben added, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must account for his blood." Joseph had to turn away to weep. These were the same brothers who had sold him into slavery over 20 years ago, yet they were filled with remorse. He composed himself, then had Simeon bound before their eyes as the hostage who would remain behind. Joseph secretly ordered his servants to fill the brothers' sacks with grain and return each man's silver to his sack. When the brothers stopped for the night and opened their sacks, they were terrified to find their money. "What is this that God has done to us?" they wondered. They returned home and told Jacob everything. He was devastated. "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." But as the famine continued and their grain ran out, they had no choice. Judah finally convinced Jacob to let Benjamin go, promising to bear the blame forever if anything happened to him. Jacob reluctantly agreed, sending them back with double the silver, gifts of balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he could barely contain his emotions. He ordered a feast prepared at his house. The brothers were afraid, thinking they were being brought there because of the silver found in their sacks. But Joseph's steward reassured them and brought Simeon out to them. When Joseph arrived, they presented their gifts and bowed before him. "How is your aged father you told me about?" Joseph asked. "Is he still living and well?" They assured him their father was alive and well, and bowed low again. Then Joseph looked at Benjamin, his own mother's son, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother?" His emotions overwhelmed him, and he hurried to a private room where he wept. After composing himself, Joseph returned and served them a meal. The brothers were amazed to be seated in exact age order, from the oldest to the youngest, and Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than anyone else's. Joseph orchestrated one final test. He had his silver cup placed in Benjamin's sack, then sent his steward to accuse them of theft. When the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, the brothers tore their clothes in anguish and returned to the city. They fell to the ground before Joseph. "What can we say?" Judah pleaded. "God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We're now your slaves, both we and the one who was found with the cup." "Only the man with the cup will be my slave," Joseph replied. "The rest of you may return to your father." Then Judah stepped forward with one of the most moving speeches in ancient literature. He explained how their elderly father's life was bound up in Benjamin's life, how losing Rachel's other son would kill him. "Please let me remain as your slave instead of the boy," Judah begged. "How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me?" Joseph could bear it no longer. He sent all his Egyptian attendants away and wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him. "I am Joseph," he cried out. "Is my father still living?" His brothers were terrified, unable to answer. But Joseph called them closer. "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Don't be distressed or angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine, and for 5 more years there will be no plowing or reaping. God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it wasn't you who sent me here, but God." He embraced Benjamin and wept, then kissed all his brothers. Pharaoh heard the news and was pleased, telling Joseph to bring his entire family to live in the best part of Egypt. Joseph sent carts, supplies, and gifts back with his brothers, along with a message for his father. "Come down to me without delay." When Jacob heard that Joseph was alive and ruler of all Egypt, his heart almost stopped. But when he saw the carts and heard everything Joseph had said, his spirit revived. "My son Joseph is still alive," he exclaimed. "I will go and see him before I die." So Jacob and his entire family, 70 people in all, journeyed to Egypt. When Joseph heard his father was approaching, he had his chariot prepared and rode out to meet him. As soon as Joseph appeared, Jacob threw his arms around him and wept for a long time. "Now I'm ready to die," Jacob said, "since I've seen for myself that you're still alive." Joseph settled his family in the region of Goshen, the best land in Egypt, where they prospered and multiplied. He provided for them throughout the remaining years of famine, and his father lived to see his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Years later, when Jacob was about to die, he blessed Joseph's sons and all his own sons, prophesying about their futures. He made Joseph and his brothers promise to bury him in the cave with his fathers in Canaan, which they faithfully did. After Jacob's death, the brothers feared Joseph might finally take revenge. They sent him a message claiming Jacob had asked Joseph to forgive them. Joseph wept when he received it. When his brothers came and threw themselves down before him, he said, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." Joseph lived to be 110 years old and saw his great-great-grandchildren. Before he died, he made his brothers swear an oath. "God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When that happens, you must carry my bones up from this place." And so Joseph died, having lived a life that demonstrated how suffering can be transformed into purpose, how betrayal can become redemption, and how one person's faithfulness in small things, interpreting dreams in prison, can position them to save nations in great things. His story reminds us that our circumstances don't define us. Our character does. That forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. And that sometimes the longest, darkest journey leads exactly where we need to be.